My name is Cole Bennett. I'm an independent journalist based out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and you are listening to my podcast, the Cole.notcole podcast. You can find me on all the major social media platforms as Cole.notcole. Today, I got the opportunity to speak with Emily Lowan. She is the new leader of the BC Greens Party. She is only 25 years old. She is the youngest party leader in Canada today. I wanted to speak to her to talk about her plans for the BC Greens going forward, and this is our interview. Thanks for being here. I am joined by Emily Lowan. She is the newly elected leader of the BC Greens, and I am so happy that she's here with me today. And thank you for joining us, Emily.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Cole.
So I want to start off by asking you, how did we get here? How did you decide? You're 25 years old, if that's correct?
That's right. It was actually my birthday a few days before the election. So, my prefrontal cortex is totally cooked now.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the time to run for public office.
Exactly. You get it.
Um, what made you decide to run to lead the BC Greens? What was the inspiration? Is this something you've always thought about? Is politics always been sort of your end game, or how did we get here?
I blame the first election of Trump and Elizabeth May. In 2016, I was on a Via Rail train, and I think it was November 8th, November 6th, the day Trump was elected the first time around, and I was only a teenager at the time, but it was one of those sort of shattering moments for me that made me realize that no one was coming to save us, and that I needed to take my future, our shared future, into my own hands. And that really set me on my journey of climate activism. And I've spent the last decade working as a climate organizer and a policy researcher, really trying to combat the corporate forces that are trying to take over our democracy and destroy our planet. And so, yeah, over that time, I worked on political campaigns and really have just been trying to explore every lever in the book. I was a student union organizer and won a $250 million divestment of fossil fuels. Moving fossil fuels away from our university, working capital funds, and then worked at the Corporate Mapping Project through the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives, and was doing a lot of grassroots organizing across the climate justice movement. And most recently, the past 3 years, have been working at Climate Action Network Canada as a strategist, leading coalitions across climate, labor, and Indigenous nations for bolder policy action. But yeah, that's what I've been up to bring me to this point. And I see such an opportunity to occupy the left in BC, which I think has been notably absent for a little while, and to really galvanize new movements of young people, of workers, renters, Indigenous peoples across the province that are so completely disenfranchised by the status quo. And so, it's a really exciting opportunity to sort of punch through this political despair I think many of us feel with a strong sort of worker-led agenda for the province.
One of the things I hear often from people, and you sort of touched on it, is there's these people that are on the left and they feel like they have nowhere to go. They feel like the NDP and the Liberals are moving farther and farther to the right. And they're looking for an option. But one of the things we hear about most is, well, the parties that are on the left don't have a plan for the economy. They worry about the economy, and when they hear, about green energy and they hear about saving the planet, lots of people love it in theory, but they worry about, where does that land me with my job? For instance, I'm in Alberta and there's, hundreds of thousands of oil workers, and they think, am I going to be put out of work? What is the plan for that? How do you try and convince people or sell the idea of a green economy to people? Where do you see the economy going under the BC Greens?
Yeah. So right now we are investing billions of dollars into dead-end LNG projects. That is the primary way that the government plans to increase government revenue through LNG, like gas projects that are owned by foreign billionaires and will be entirely for export. And this just sort of follows BC's rip it and ship it resource economy model that has existed, since the beginning of colonization in the province. We're not innovating into the future, and we're not using the best assets of our economy, some of which includes electrification. We have some incredible geopolitical advantages in BC. We have the knowledge of how to build, a publicly owned like hydroelectric grid system, and we certainly could be producing more electricity, more transmission lines, scaled renewable projects that are owned by Indigenous nations, municipalities, and communities to export that energy actually to Alberta, to California. But we're not seeing that investment at scale. This is the cost of investing in a boom and bust extractive economy like LNG. And on the jobs front, LNG delivers very few permanent jobs. And so, there's a short-term uptick in construction jobs, but these aren't career jobs. And that's what we want to be bringing in with significant government investment. A good green jobs program. So, like I'm thinking of a program like the Youth Climate Corps. So everyone under the age of 35 who wants a green job can have one. It would be in the areas of like green retrofits, installing heat pumps, in the renewable energy industry, in actually like biodiversity and conservation, ecosystem remediation work. Like there's such a breadth of jobs in this field, and many of them are more aligned with sort of like longer term career work, that have a greater possibility of being unionized as well. So that's something that I really pushed for in my platform, like both expanding sectoral bargaining, so BC can be like the best place to like start a union across Canada. Right now the BC NDP is stonewalling public service workers as in the midst of week 6 of a public service sector strike. So yeah, there's a lot to be said here. It's a rich topic, but yeah, overall, we're really feeling the crossroads at this province, the province, where we can either choose to invest in a worker-led economy that breaks up some of the corporate monopolies, like the gas industry that dominate the province, while building the thriving future we need in renewable and less harmful industries.
If there's a policy, let's say you win your seat and we're in the next general election in BC, what is the one policy that is clear that you're going to try to sell to British Columbians? What is that one thing that you think this is it? This is what will benefit most people. This is what is going to benefit everyone.
Um, it I'm trying to find a sexy way to package this, but it is tax reform. Um,
Yeah.
and basically, right now we're letting the 1% and the biggest polluters and the biggest corporations in the province off the hook. And the government, anytime anyone, any community, any underserved program goes to them and asks for investment, asks for support, we get the same answer, that the cupboard is bare. And BC has an issue with their debt levels right now, and I think there's quite a clear answer to both address the deficit, but also spend what we need to build a more resilient, thriving future for the province. And so I propose things like a windfall profits tax, which would apply to about 35 corporations, the largest corporations in BC, and would increase the tax level from 12 to 18% on profits over 1 billion in annual profits. And so that would generate about 4.1 billion in additional revenue per year. And that's, we could spend that revenue on the Good Green Jobs program that I was just discussing, and we could really, yeah, um, see that grow at scale.
So tax the rich. Is
That's
that a
it.
good way to put it?
Tax the rich. Yeah.
I mean, lots of people like that saying, and there's always this. So then there's this sense that, well, what if these companies leave? People that's they're always, well, we're going to tax them to death. They're gonna shut down shop. They're not going to go. They're gonna go somewhere else. So what is your answer to people when they say that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fear-mongering about capital flight. You hear it, really echoed through corporate-owned media and by these corporations themselves. But the data doesn't hold up. We haven't seen that mass exodus in regions that have increased the corporate tax rate, and implemented windfall tax measures like this. And I think it's also important to remember that 70,000 people in BC leave BC every single year because of the cost of living crisis. And the fact is that these large corporations aren't taking care of their own people. They are driving up the cost of living in this province, and they're not paying their fair share into the social programs, affordable housing and green jobs programs that would make life far more manageable. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's important to sort of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. I also, I think, just laugh a little bit at the argument because, um, you know, billionaires and corporations in BC don't, come to this province because they think it's a tax haven. It is a beautiful place to be, to work, and it is like, Vancouver, for instance, is, an internationally known economic capital. It's an innovation hub, and there's so many advantages to being headquartered there, strategically, and, our access to the ports and international waters is rare. So I think, we don't need to have our tail between our legs when we negotiate with big capital, but, we need to be very evidence-based and realize the advantages our province has.
How would you describe the state of BC politics right now? If you could sum it up, for somebody who's never lived there, how would you describe BC politics to them? Lay it out for us. How would you describe the Conservatives and the NDP and where the BC Greens fit in? And what is sort of the evolving issues that are going on there right now?
Yeah, I mean, we can get really caught up in the bluster of what each party is saying in day to day, but I think it's important to look a level deeper and you know call out the corporations and billionaire interests that really call the shots in the premier's office, that are in there themselves, holding the pen on much of the policy that we see in government. We saw a brilliant investigation last year on TC Energy, which is a multinational energy company, a fossil fuel company, that basically single-handedly diluted climate policy and helped roll back carbon tax measures, and brags about their extraordinarily invasive lobbying tactics of government ministers, from cornering them in the freezer aisle of at the local Costco. Like it's far reaching, and it's certainly an area that informs our policy day to day. And so I'm, as BC Greens leader, I see us as like a watchdog to the corporate power that is unfolding in this province, and to really hold the government and their feet to the fire. The BC Greens occupy an important and outsized role, actually, despite only having 2 MLA seats. We have a history of holding the balance of power with 3 seats, and we currently hold a cooperation agreement with the BC NDP, who act, I would say more politically aligned with sort of the like Carney's Liberals. Like that's effectively the role they play politically.
I would
Um,
agree.
and so, yeah, people get confused by the NDP title, but that's certainly not sort of the reality on the ground. Um, yeah, so we have this agreement with the government called Carga, and really my job now is to go out in the field, as an currently a non-sitting leader, and build as much momentum as I possibly can, on the ground in communities, rallies, and I'm doing a province tour next month. Um, but to find those leverage points, to really scare the NDP into yeah, cooperating with us in the next election, and that could you know we can look at that from a few different angles, but certainly in the renegotiation of this agreement, we need to negotiate from a place of strength. So I really see sort of the movement building work I'm doing, as in service to that. And yeah, I mean, the Conservatives are kind of a dumpster fire, for lack of a better
I see
term right now.
a lot of residential school denialism from the Conservatives in BC. That's
Yes.
whenever somebody asks me about BC Conservatives, I just say residential school deniers. That sums them up.
Looking for Yeah, there's all sorts of denialism, climate denialism, hate speech towards trans and LGBTQ plus youth and many others. Yeah, the list goes on. But I guess more notably, the right side of the spectrum has fragmented more recently. So there are now sort of new parties biting at the right flank of, John Rustad's Conservatives, and he just went through a leadership review as well, and I think despite having 8,000 members in the Conservative Party, I think only 1,300 voted. It was an extraordinarily low turnout rate. So yeah, there's all sorts of things to be said about the political ecosystem right now, but I'm very excited to have this opportunity with the Greens to really fill the vacuum on the left side, and to hold the NDP's feet to the fire on issues like climate, housing, and Indigenous rights.
One thing I wanted to ask, and this will probably be kind of the thing that we'll finish up on a bit, is a lot of times people will say that the left, I've been accused of it. I know is that the left runs a purity test for people. If you want to be a part of the left, you have to adopt everything
I'm so over it.
that they agree on. What do you say? What do you say to that? How do you tell people that maybe have different views than you that they are welcome in the BC Greens?
Yeah, I think, I mean, what we saw through sort of the mid 2010s to like early 2020s was just this like evisceration of the left through cancel culture and, through these really toxic leftist movement organizing spaces. And I sure hope that we've gotten it out of our system, because it was so corrosive, and I think it honestly fueled some of the like right wing backlash amongst young men. The way that I think the left rejected men and had all these um yeah, in some cases like purity tests, as you said, and I think it sort of created this mass exodus where they were far more vulnerable to figures on the far right. And we certainly saw that reflected in the election results, last fall, amongst sort of new um new conservative voters. Many of them are young men. So yeah, the left has a lot of work to do to open its doors, but, yeah, I mean, I'm seeing promising evidence that that's starting to change, like, through my campaign, I mean, I had some of those young men and new conservative voters come to my campaign and say, "Wow, like, your message is speaking to me, this makes sense," like, why is life so hard, and why do these corporate monopolies and billionaires call the shots in the premier's office, and so I think it's an opportunity for, um, the left to, and especially like the environmental left, to, yeah, redefine itself and remake its identity to actually appeal to workers and people that wouldn't consider themselves so-called progressive. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think we've been fairly successful so far, but I'm doing a whole tour across the province, looking at uh, the large companies and corporations that have a direct frontline impact on workers, and from the the mill closures in Prince George to, yeah, the control that Saputo has over our dairy industry. Like, there's so many stories to share, and real solutions and alternatives to offer that we can, yeah, bring to light, and work alongside communities to fight for, yeah, control over our economy and democracy.
Um, any plans to run for a seat in the near future? Is there any by-elections coming up, or
Yeah, not hearing any by-elections, but I'm certainly open to it, and, yeah, there's rumblings of, a snap election, so, yeah, we're sort of all hands on deck preparing for a possible election.
okay, well, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. We'll wrap it up right there,
Right
and,
on.
hopefully we'll talk again.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for the fun conversation, Cole, and, yeah, happy to chat again.